What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people have been alert to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and that is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we continue with this series of building out the Buffalo Bills draft board. It's something that, I guess differs a little bit from the typical mock draft schedule and show running style that a lot of people engage in. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think having these detailed, higher level breakdown and evaluation conversations kind of put more things into perspective as we get more into mock draft season, get closer towards the NFL draft. And so this idea kind of came about organically, and I've liked the idea of bringing in different evaluators and analysts and getting their perspective and using it all to kind of put things into perspective for you folks watching and listening to this show. Again, and really rounding out the Bills board, talking about prospects, tiers, different positions and areas of need for this team. Last week, we had Russell Brown on the show, tremendous guest and friend of the show. And we continue to trudge on with part two in this series. And to join me on part two of this series, Mr. James Foster of the A to Z Sports Film Room. James, I'm happy to have you here. You do great work. I think you and I started engaging like 2 draft seasons ago and just talking about draft stuff. I had you on the show to do Bills Titans a couple years ago in that week 2 matchup. I think later that same year when we first started engaging on Twitter. You do a ton of film stuff, a ton of evaluation, rankings and spreadsheets and combining stuff and comps. You're genuinely I should say, a really, really good draft resource, and you do good work. I appreciate you for being here, and welcome to the show.
I appreciate the kind words. Thanks for having me on.
And you've always done like the A to Z sports stuff and the breakdown pieces and film cut-ups and all that on Twitter. But, like I mentioned with you doing the A to Z sports film room now, platform is yours a little bit right now. Tell everybody kind of what you do and where you're living in and draft space and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at NoFlagsFilm. And then on YouTube, I run the A to Z Sports Film Room YouTube channel. Do a bunch of film breakdowns on there. Doing my positional rankings videos right now, trying to crank those out leading up to the draft. I've been having some issues with college film on YouTube. It's kind of a dangerous game putting that out there. But once the draft's over, we'll be back to the film breakdowns, which I'm excited for.
Yeah, man, it's NFL stuff is getting cracked down on a bit, and college film is always wonky in general. Like just getting access to it, it's like the black market of like sports film, like getting college all 22. And yeah, the actual like posting of it and breaking stuff down and doing things. But like I said, you're genuinely like a go-to source for me. You do great stuff, and just the edits and putting everything together, the players you focus on, the positional rankings, all that stuff. And that's kind of what spurred this conversation and you being a guest on tonight's show. And like I said, I am very pumped to have you. And let's, I guess, just dive right into it because we got a bunch of stuff to talk about and a bunch of stuff to break down. Wide receiver is a big position of conversation for Bills Mafia, for Bills fans. If you do a mock draft and your first pick like isn't a wide receiver, people are going to be very, very upset. It doesn't matter who you get. It could be, there would be some exceptions, but like Dallas Turner could fall to 28 and you could take him and fans are still going to be pissed because you didn't take a wide receiver. Or even if you traded and got all this value and all these picks, if you didn't get this one specific wide receiver, fans will potentially be up in arms. So wide receiver is a really big topic of conversation for the Buffalo Bills and for their fans, given what the roster looks like. And the first 3 are really set. Whatever order, you may have 2 and 3, but Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, those are the big 3. After the big 3, I think is really where the conversation starts, not just in relation to the Bills, but really in that first round, like kind of the whole conversation. Myself and Russell Brown got into it last week a bit in trying to map out and diagram what the first 27 picks would look like. One of those conversation pieces built into that was how many wide receivers would go and who would be on the board for the Bills if they wanted to go wide receiver at 28. But let's look at it large scale right now. So forget Harrison, forget Neighbors, forget Odunze. Who are the next 3 wide receivers for you after those big 3?
So for me, I have after the top tier of Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, I have a tier of two players with AD Mitchell as my 15th overall player and Brian Thomas Jr. at 19th. Um, and then after that, I've got Lad McConkey and Xavier Worthy at 29 and 31 respectively. So those are the 7 receivers that I have in my top 32.
Okay.
AD Mitchell, I can check here. Yeah, I'm as high on AD Mitchell as pretty much anyone. There's a couple people that have him at 14th on their board, but I'm irresponsibly high on AD Mitchell. I understand the downside that he's in the bottom left corner on a lot of production plots and stuff, and he takes routes off when he's on the backside of the play. But man, I think that if you actually dive into his film, the number of plays where he's a part of the progression and he's actually being like locked up by man coverage, it's pretty hard to find those. It's hard to find plays where he drops the ball. When he is actually fully engaged, he has route running fluidity and change of direction that you just can't teach for a player of his size. And I mean, I very early in the draft process, like I try to isolate myself, or like early, I try to isolate myself from as external analysis as much as I can,
Same.
and then later try to listen to people that know what they're talking about and take in opposing viewpoints. But early in the process, I went into Texas offense with no preconceived notion of AD Mitchell, and I think the first game I watched, he had 30 or 40 receiving yards, but I came away from it saying this is a first round pick. And I think as the season progressed and they started to use him and involve him a little bit more in the passing offense. He had some issues with inaccurate quarterbacks. I think that similar to Brian Thomas, he flashes some elite skills as a contested catch threat, but inconsistent physicality at the catch point, I think, for a player of his size. But yeah, AD Mitchell is a clear first round grade to me, and I think the next best out of the first round receivers.
It's so funny when you talked about your evaluation process, because I almost do the exact same thing. Like I don't want to know. And like if I'm talking about, we'll use AD Mitchell for example. Like if I'm talking about him and someone's about to be like, oh, you know who really likes AD Mitchell? And they go to say, I'm like, no. Like, don't tell me. Like, I don't want to know who likes him, who doesn't, what their thought process is. It's the same when I do like in season breaking down film after games on Sundays or Mondays or whatever. I isolate myself completely from social media and anything because I don't want to see a breakdown of a play. I don't want to get any, because even if you try your damnedest to be like, I'm going to flush that out, I'm not going to let that influence me. Even if it's not in the forefront of your brain, it's in like the back of your mind, especially if you're hearing or reading stuff or seeing stuff from people that you respect. It's kind of really hard to not let that cloud your judgment. Yeah. And so
like, there's no way I can just, listen to an athletic football show episode in September or something and hear Dane Brugler just like gush about a player and then like not let that at least influence my biases heading into it. Like at this point, I feel confident enough in my own evaluations that I'm more than willing to go against consensus or whatever. But yeah, I like to just try to go into it with a perfectly clean slate, and I'm not losing any sleep over missing on an evaluation because I know it's going to happen. So it's like, there's going to be some players that I miss on where maybe if I would have just played it safe and like tried to, shape it off of consensus, I would have hit on them. But, whatever. That's why I'm not a GM. I'm glad that my job security isn't tied to that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's good just to, again, like when you're confident in your process, I think that's such an important piece. And that's one of my favorite things about you. Like the players you break down or your evaluation, it's not just like, okay, I've seen or heard this 100 times. Like you can tell whether right or wrong, like this is your process, this is what you believe in. And I like to operate in that same way. And with Mitchell, similar to you, like I shielded myself from everything. I had nothing really going. I watched him a little bit before I went to the Senior Bowl. in early February. I watched the Alabama-Texas game. That was the first game I watched for him. And I came away like, wow, like I really like this. But I, again, shielded myself, which was really hard too at the friggin' Senior Bowl when everybody wants to like talk prospects. Like I tried to really, anytime I heard, unless it was a player at the Senior Bowl, I really tried to stay away from conversations and not engage with my ears or mouth. But I recognize some of the flaws that he had, but I came away from his tape similar to you. I was like, wow, like I see this guy with this smooth athletic fluidity, like, and I recognize the whole effort at times or him not running routes at full speed, but I'd watch him and juxtapose him with Xavier Worthy, who runs a lot of his routes at full speed, and Xavier Worthy's coming off the line hard, and Mitchell isn't. But they're at like the same level. Granted, maybe like Mitchell's on the line and or Worthy's on the line and Mitchell's off, or vice versa. And maybe that like throws a little, someone's got like a half a step head start. But when I see like the power and the suddenness out of his breaks and the explosion, the way he high points the football, the contested catch ability, you see, like there's a couple that stick in my head. The long touchdown against Alabama where he puts the move on Key, he sells outside, gets him to open up a little bit, and then just stabs, boom, hits the middle, and then tracks it over the top and brings it in is beautiful. And then he's got one against Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I really, really, really like. Texas kind of backed up in the shadow of their own goal line, and it's just a contested catch downfield up the sideline. Yeah, you know which one it is. Like he doesn't hold the red
left
line
sideline.
Yep. And if you're watching the tape, it's going from left to right. Yeah, and it's like that's a hard catch, and McKinstry's got his hand in there. He punches through the hands, and Mitchell just makes that really nice catch. And I was impressed, like watching him. And so when I came to the rest of the world, I was surprised to see how polarizing of a guy he is. Like I feel like there's not a lot of in between with Mitchell. It's either, no, I'm completely out because of the stats or because of the lack of effort I see at times. And then there's nothing in the middle. And then everyone else that likes him is pure, no, he's wide receiver 4 for me, or he's wide receiver 5. I believe in the explosion. I believe he can be coached up type of thing. And it's funny that you mentioned him in conjunction with Brian Thomas, because I put kind of both of them in a different boat stylistically, but also similar because Thomas, 6'3", 210 pounds, running that 4.3 40, but I feel like a lot of his projection is also projection. I know there's, again, a different size or frame element to them, but Thomas is far from a polished player. I think he takes routes off at times. He's not a complete route runner at all, but I feel like that label has gotten passed on more to Mitchell than it has Thomas. And I think really they're more similar than they are different in terms of like kind of that expectation and ceiling versus floor to a degree. Although I do think the ceiling is potentially higher with Thomas, just given the overall ridiculous. I mean, when you're 6'3" and 210 and you run a 4.3, that's wild. But yeah, it's funny how that's gone to Mitchell and not so much to Thomas.
Yeah, I think they're very similar players, just in the sense of the size, speed, athleticism, but having some red flags, on the field. I think that to me, the one thing that really separates Mitchell from Thomas is that I think Mitchell can come away and come into the NFL and immediately be an intermediate separator at a high level. Like with Thomas, I just don't see quite that ability to snap off his routes the way that Mitchell can. Like just, the acute angles, just sinking the hips and creating so much horizontal separation with Mitchell is what really sold me. And then, I mean, the speed, I thought he had, good speed on tape. Didn't quite expect a 4.34 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But, the speed's just kind of icing on the cake. To me, what really, really sold it was the quickness and the fluidity in and out of breaks. With Thomas, I think that is a little bit lacking, and I think it might be somewhat of an athletic limitation with Thomas. And so, I kind of see him as being more of, I think probably to me, the most common outcome, if you ran a million simulations for Brian Thomas, is a high-end wide receiver 2, where like you're still looking to get that complete guy that can run the entire route tree to pair with him.
Oh, I like that. I think that's fair. And yeah, there's just, I don't know if it's just the way he moves in talking about Mitchell. Like he comes out of cuts sometimes and like the lower body, like flexion that he has. And I always like, it's like he's got a recoil, like he leans and just bang, like and it's so funny too, because like it's on routes where like it doesn't look like he's trying. It looks like he's running like 30% and he's running a slant, but he puts that foot in the ground and stabs. And when he comes out, he creates like 5 yards of separation instantly, like the power and the explosion that's there. And it's also, I also wonder too, a fair amount, what's coached and what's expected, which is obviously like so hard for us to know. Cause there's reps where he has some of like the worst blocking attempts I've ever seen. And so my first thought is the first 4 games I watched were Alabama, TCU, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. And the first
4 of
3
his
of
better
those
games. Yeah.
Yes. And so, but that Kansas State game, crazy amount of production. I came away from that game being like, I don't like him. And then I watched some of the lower production games after, and I was like, I like him more, even though his production is less than these ones. But he's got a block in the Oklahoma State game. It's a 4th and 1. And he's leading it out. He's got to block the corner, and he just wrecks him, gets his hands on him, drives him out, kicks him out. Texas gets the first down. It's all because of his block on the front side. But almost like the heavy majority, like I would say 97% of any blocking rep before that I saw, it looked like he couldn't care less. And then I see that one and I'm like, okay, he can do it. And so I wonder wherever he goes, like he's got so much ability, and people talk about the flashes either positively or negatively. And I really feel like he's that guy who I think he has so much potential, but where he goes and what your expectations are for him are strongly going to shape what he is. And I don't know if it's a lack of those expectations at Texas, or it was like, yeah, we don't care if you don't block on this player, take this off or don't do whatever. Like, because you just see some of that inconsistency in his game. But if you can get those positive flashes out of him more consistently, man, and I do like your point from an intermediate perspective versus Thomas. Like, the most encouraging thing I saw about Thomas, aside from just being like big guy runs fast, on a couple of his hitches and routes, like you'd see him sink his hips and it wouldn't take him too many steps. I'm like, okay, like that's a positive thing. But Mitchell, you're watching him separate on in-breakers. He's a really good in-breaking route runner, like the slants, again, that explosion. He in the low red zone, he operates with that deception, and he's got the ability to create doubt in the corner. And when you pair that with the explosion out of his breaks,
Kool-Aid in hell on those quick slants on the goal line.
That first touchdown against Bama, he's done. And Ewers just waits for, I think Caleb Downs is the safety coming, and he just waits for Mitchell to clear him. McKinstry's beat in an instant. Yeah, it's done. He's got another one in the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma State. Doesn't get the ball.
Doesn't get targeted. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like the lower part of the screen, just wild separation. And I see that, and I just, and I get the other parts, but yeah, I just wasn't expecting, like, I came to Twitter and posted my stuff, and the amount of people that were like, yeah, I love him. And then just as many were like, no, I hate him. He sucks. And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting like this type of kind of dichotomy, I guess. So getting out of that grouping. So we talked a little bit about Thomas. We talked a bit about Mitchell. You gave your other ranking pieces. When we come to the Buffalo Bills, say they're going to take a wide receiver at 28. In your estimation, given what the roster looks like and given, your evaluation for these prospects, which wide receiver, again, for everyone playing at home, aside from the big 3, I don't want to hear anybody be like, man, it'd be really ideal if Rome Odunze fell. He's not going to fall. So which wide receiver, aside from the big 3, is the ideal fit in your estimation for the Buffalo Bills?
So let me rank the 4
I like this.
receivers that I think you could justify taking at 28 for the Bills. Is it 28 or 27?
28.
28. Okay, so I would say A.D. Mitchell. I would say Brian Thomas Jr. I would say Xavier Legette.
Yes, nice.
And then hot take, but I would say Jermaine Burton.
Bro, no hot takes around here. I love Jermaine Burton. And the thing, and I always give the caveat with everything, his interview process is going to be so important because of the, the character stuff. But from an on the field, like tape perspective, dude, like the speed, the athleticism downfield, he's able to high point the football. He's back shoulder catching stuff off frame. He's a much better route runner than he gets credit for. He's got a really great rocker step, and he's got toughness and speed after the catch. He's got one touchdown. I think it's against A&M. Well, he's got a bunch of plays against A&M, but catches a slant at like the 15, breaks 2 tackles, and then got the speed to change the angle on the safety, and he's gone. Like, he does so much. And I don't know if the character stuff is driving him down, but no hot take here at all. Like, or sitting here with me, like I really, really love Jermaine Burton from, and again, before anybody jumps down or throws, from an on the field tape perspective, there's a ton to like with Burton. Interesting that you go. So Mitchell's been a popular one for Bills fans. Thomas has been there as well. I think if I had to like poll it, I think for most Bills fans, Brian Thomas is the ideal. Leggett has creeped up there, but I think the three like ideal in a realistic fashion right now is some combination of Thomas, Mitchell, and Leggett. I really like either of those three in the Bills lineup and roster this year because I talked about it on last week's episode. Whoever you draft at 20, say you take a receiver at 28 for the Bills, right? And he becomes like wide receiver 2 this year, potentially, which isn't necessarily a guarantee because Curtis Samuel could be wide receiver 2 for you. But whoever you take is target or option like 4, 5, or 6 because Stephon Diggs is 1, Dalton Kincaid is 2. If you're factoring in the run game and looking at touches, James Cook is probably 2 from a pass catching standpoint and a running standpoint. But either way, your top 3, you're looking at Diggs, Cook, Kincaid. You've got Curtis Samuel. You've got Khalil Shakir. You've got Dawson Knox. Like you've got these pieces already. So taking someone with raw physical tools like a Thomas, like a Leggett, for instance, or again, even Mitchell, like with that size profile, the frame profile, that true X type of potential and frame and body type that isn't present on this roster, and allowing them to develop as a rookie while there's not a lot of pressure, because again, their option 4, 5, or 6 or whatever. I think like Leggett, I think makes a ton of sense for that because I mean, just the Bills don't have a dude with his size, power, long speed, explosion, but he needs to develop more from a stem perspective and a route tree perspective. Cool. Let him do that as a rookie. And all he has to do is be big, strong, and fast. Similar with Brian Thomas. I think Mitchell is in a similar boat, but to your point, I think Mitchell is ahead of both of those guys when it comes to route running in terms of their route tree and stem work and all that. But I think that gets lost in the conversation for a lot of people because it's like, we need a wide receiver 2. We need a wide receiver 2. Yeah, technically from a depth chart perspective, but your wide receiver 2 is really Kincaid. And then with what Cook does, at best, you're looking at 4, but now you've got Samuel. Now you've got Shakir. So I think that gives the Bills a lot of options in terms of getting someone who can develop as a rookie and then potentially hit that ceiling because you don't need them to hit that ceiling, and hit the ground running if you take them this year.
Yeah, and for the Bills specifically, I'm thinking of it in terms of not only this next year, but having a Stephon Diggs replacement down the line.
Yeah.
And like I think that AD Mitchell, Xavier Leggett, those are players that could potentially develop into wide receiver 1s. Whereas someone like Ladd McConkey, who I have rated higher than Leggett, it's hard for me to see him being the number 1 option on a team's, in a team's passing game. I think he has a very high chance of being, at least a number 2, like solid number 2 option. So, I think that, not to keep laboring the AD Mitchell versus Brian Thomas point, but I think that just what AD Mitchell's potential is as a separator running the full route tree, I think is someone that could come in and start out as a secondary option and then develop and maybe improve his effort and eventually become the number 1 option.
I think it's a fair point. Like it's that weighing of the ceiling versus the floor. And yeah, McConkey's an interesting one for me because I don't know what his ceiling is or how much there is for him to hit a ceiling. And I don't say that negatively. I say that because I think his floor is just so high already. Like he is a professional route runner at an NFL level right now. You see it on tape. I saw it at the Senior Bowl. I think he can work outside and inside. Him running in the 4.3s was something I did not expect at all. Both him and Ricky Pearsall. I didn't expect Pearsall to run a 4.41. I didn't expect McConkey to hit in the 4.3s, but not even just from a vertical, straight line speed standpoint. You can see McConkey win downfield on the tape. There's a route or a rep against Tennessee where he's running a vertical and he uses a rocker step in a go route to freeze the corner and then shift and get around him, and he's gone. He doesn't get the football, but he creates like 5-6 yards of separation. I think he can work inside and outside, but I wonder yeah, like how tapped out is he already towards his max? But I think what the good news for him is the if he is already kind of tapped out to that max, he just gives you such a high floor because he can run anything and everything from a variety of alignments. He's super smart with that high functional, football IQ. So you're getting like exactly your point. Like, I don't know if he'll ever be a wide receiver one or like a true one, but he's a plug and play wide receiver two from the minute he steps on the field, even as a rookie, like right now in almost any offense.
Yeah, and like the one thing that I think is just limiting his upside, quote unquote, is size. You see that
Yeah. From a
both at the
frame
catch
standpoint.
point. Like I don't really trust him to win contested catches in the NFL. I also thought his route speed really dropped off if he was having to deal with physicality down the stem. Like if you just can get him clean releases, I mean, he's gonna cook flat-footed corners if he's got a two-way go. But if you've got Pat Surtain in press coverage, I think that he has the foot speed to shake guys at the line of scrimmage sometimes. But then if he just kind of has to power through a two-hand jam and they're in phase down the field, I feel like he might kind of get blanketed a little bit. But yeah, I think plug and play high end wide receiver two. My three comps for him, I've got Deontay Johnson, Sterling Shepard, and Brandon Stokely. So like a combination of those three players. But yeah, really, really like Ladd McConkey. He's a top 32 player for me.
And yeah, I echo a lot of those sentiments, and I similar to like what holds him back from being a true one. I just don't know with his, and it's more of like a frame concern for me. Yeah, like how much is he really separating at the catch point if he has to go up and get it? Like, is he winning those contested catches regularly? Like, and the one clip that sticks in my head is Terry and Arnold clamping down on him late in that SEC game after McConkey cooked him earlier a little bit. Not completely cooked him, but ran a really nice out route on him. Yeah, I just wonder against NFL size and length from an outside standpoint, like you're facing longer, bigger corners, usually on the outside. What happens if you get into those press alignments, even if it's a soft shoe press, right? Guys that are going to kind of close down that space and not allow you to breathe. His release is going to have to be almost extremely precise and winnable every single time, which could potentially happen because he's got a good release package. But yeah, like I just worry a little bit from a size and frame standpoint. But again, that's just for like the ceiling. Like we talked about, his floor is so high already. I want to throw another name into that mix just to get your thought. Javon Baker, what do you think about wide receiver from the wide receiver from UCF?
Yeah, I really like Javon Baker. It's funny with this receiver class because like people ask me about someone and I'll be like, yeah, I really like him. He's my wide receiver 26.
Yeah.
Like it seems so insulting,
dude.
But
I've done that with I've been on Baker since before the Senior Bowl. Liked him even more when I saw him in person at the Senior Bowl. And so I probably, if you search my Twitter handle in Javon, like if you search pro Ant Javon, I probably have like literally 14, 15 clips just gushing about him. And yet at that point, if someone's like, man, like you love Javon Baker, like where do you have him? I'd be like, man, I'd really like to get him at the back end of round 2. And someone's like, what? But you said you really like him. I'm like, yeah, I know. I really like him. Like, I'd love to get him at pick 60.
Yeah. And especially with this receiver class, it's like, I think of Javon Baker as someone in a normal year that would be my wide receiver 9 or 10 or something. I've got him at wide receiver 16. So I really like him. Like the creativity and the manipulation, the uncertainty that he's able to force corners into at the line of scrimmage and at the top of the route. He's a fun player to watch, man. And like, I feel like it's sometimes, he needs to kind of trim the fat off of some of his releases. There's a little bit too much dancing at the line of scrimmage, I feel like, but
the dancing is really fun sometimes.
But no, but it's awesome. No, it's awesome. It's like, so sometimes I just watch back these plays and I'm like, okay, this is not real. This might not fly in the NFL, but that's a coaching type of thing.
As soon as you said that real quick, the one that comes to mind, I think it's his touchdown against Villanova, where he literally is just like this at the line for like 3 seconds and then just completely goes by his man, runs a corner, separates and wins. And that, I love it. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't think you can spend like 2.5 seconds on like the line.
Yeah.
But also like this was pretty baller.
And the ball skills, if you just he's a player where, like, if you just watch his highlights, the ball skills are incredible. His ability to high point it and pluck it out of the air, and some of his over the shoulder ball tracking,
Mm,
being able to win through contact at the catch point, and then there's just inexplicable drops and lapses in focus. Like, he had two plays that I watched where he dropped a wide open accurate pass and it ended up getting intercepted. And he's had a pretty high drop rate every season of his career, so that adds a little bit of uncertainty for me. I also don't think he has great deep speed. I really like his ability to decelerate and cut off routes on the vertical plane, but felt like he struggled to pull away from corners vertically sometimes. So yeah, I've got a late third round grade on him. I think just a Michael Gallup type of receiver is what I project him being, and definitely like his play demeanor. He's someone that I'm going to be a fan of regardless of what team he goes to.
Yeah, when he blew that kiss to the Oklahoma sideline, I was like, yes, sign me up for him. Let's stick on this wide receiver train before we switch to some other positions. Favorite day 2 and day 3 wide receivers, could be multiple guys, could be one. Who are some of the guys that you like in rounds 2 and 3 or 4 and later?
All right, so I had two for each day. The first one we touched on a little bit for day 2 is Jermaine Burton. Really, the only thing that's holding me back from a first round grade, I've got him 41st overall right now, is just the off the field stuff. Hit the girl after the UT game when they were storming the field.
Yeah.
You'll see him on tape, like doing some Grayson Allen type of stuff, kicking people in the unmentionables after the play. So yeah, interview is going to be huge for him, but on tape, there's just not too many flaws that you can pick out in his game. I think, can run the entire route tree, 90-degree angle cuts, outstanding ball skills. He's got speed. Wish he had a more diverse release package, but I think he can be just a Z receiver that eventually could develop into a team's number one option. My second day 2 guy that I had is probably more of a third round pick, but it's Malik Washington.
Oh, nice.
Out of Virginia.
Yes.
Yeah. Got him as wide receiver 15. To me, Malik Washington is the experience that I was hoping to have watching Malachi Corley's tape.
Nice.
I like what he can do after the catch. I comped him to a spring doorstop. Those yeah, because it's like people defenders will come and tackle him high, and he just plants his feet in the ground, kind of like bends a little bit, and then just springs right back up. Has that elite contact balance, good vision after the catch. He's a smaller player, but he catches everything. He doesn't drop the ball. He's outstanding in contested catch situations. Great ball tracking skills. I think he's an above average route runner. He's got some, deceptive salesmanship at the top of the route and stuff. Not one of these elite like joystick type of Zay Flowers type of movers. And I think he ran a good 40 time, but I feel like the speed kind of tops out a little bit. I wish he had a little bit more juice running down the field, but as just a solid, like, high end slot receiver, man, I'm a huge fan of Malik Washington.
He got a ton of targets at Virginia, but the production was still there overall. And out of 8, let me see, there were 110 players this past season that had at least 80 targets. He was tied for 9th in yards per route run. And you see him do it in a variety of ways. Like, he's getting some screens, and then he's winning in the intermediate. He's getting some vertical stuff. He can win in the low red zone and separate. He's got a really nice, like, stutter go, double moves, like his ability to like anticipate and sell enough. And again, with him, I'm in a similar boat. I was hoping he'd test better from like a true 40 long speed perspective, but where he wins, where his speed really comes in, I think is that burst that he shows, like in and out of like being able to sell that deception on a double move or coming out of it like when he makes a
They
move
run
in
a
the open
they run
field.
a lot of out and ups
Yep,
with him. Yeah.
absolutely. And again, it makes sense. Like all you need is somebody to bite and give slight hesitation, and then when he kicks it back up again, he's gone. And there's a couple reps too on like screens. Like there's one, oh, I forget who it's against, but it's like a 50-yard gain, and he makes probably 40 of it happen because he bounces off like 3 defenders, like 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. They hit him, and he's just got, with his frame and that power and that contact balance combined with the speed, he's a hard dude to bring down after the catch. So I'm a big fan of Malik Washington. And now that you said it too, like I keep saying that, like I like Malik Washington, I like Taj Washington. There's so many like receivers that I really like, and it'll be like, oh, like where do you have him? Like, oh, the 4th round. Oh, like the 5th
Yeah.
round. But it's just
And not
this.
even the round, but like just in this class, the overall rankings
Yeah.
sounds so disrespectful compared
Yeah.
to how you actually view them. Because like when we go into day 3, one of my guys that I had is Taj Washington, who you mentioned, and I've got him at wide receiver 26. But that's still a 5th round grade for me. And I think he's kind of a more of an average athlete, but he is a very technically sound, nuanced route runner. Just very patient, setting up his routes, shifting gears. I think flashed the ability to win in contested catches, but he's not, doesn't really have the size to like carve out his own catch space.
But he does play bigger at the catch point that he has any right to, given his like height and frame. Like he makes
right.
some catches. Like I know he's still going to struggle in the NFL, but he goes up and gets it to a point that I was expecting pure jitterbug stuff when I saw the size and frame, and he's out there like out leaping dudes like at post safeties and taking shots in the middle of the field, splitting 2 high looks, going up and getting it and coming down with it like more than he has any right to.
Yeah, only had 1 drop this past season. He wins after the catch. He's got 462 special team snaps for his career. Those are the type of players that I give a half a round bump to. Just no teams are going to value that. So yeah, I mean he's another, I think, just like maybe lower ceiling but high floor type of slot prospect. Another player that I think can win on the outside, actually played mostly on the outside in college, is Anthony Gold out of Oregon State.
Ooh, nice.
Really big fan of his releases off the line of scrimmage. He's got one of the most diverse release packages in this class. He just puts press corners in a blender. The foot speed, the ability to snap off horizontal route breaks. Interesting that I thought that he kind of struggled at times with curl routes. He didn't look as fluid, sinking his hips, but he was a great tester at the combine, had a 4.39 40, 39.5-inch vertical. I think that what he can do probably as a Z receiver, he's one of my favorite of all the smaller day 3 receivers. Anthony Gold's my favorite. I have him 21st on my receiver board.
Nice. He was one who I made a note of early on when I was watching Fuaga for Oregon State. And like I would just see this receiver that kept popping off. And I was like, okay, like I need to make a note of like who that is so I can come back to him later. And I came back to him way late. And in between that, like I would post a clip of any receiver and I would get people on Twitter being like, oh, what do you think of Anthony Gold? What do you think of Anthony Gold? I'd be like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And then, of course, he runs that 4.3 and just solidifies like more hype for him. I'm interested to see like a lot of these smaller frame, smaller body dudes kind of, even though like Washington is like Malik Washington is thick, but like Taj is on the smaller size and frame, man. Like Gould is a little bit as well. I'm really interested for a lot of these guys after last year's class with, for me, Jordan Addison was wide receiver 1, but from a traditional standpoint, much smaller in size and frame than what like a normal wide receiver 1 is in a class. I really like Josh Downs. He was super small. I was very, very, very high on Tank Dell. Extreme outlier from a size perspective. I'm wondering how much like those size outlier guys continue to do in the league, not even just as rookies, but overall as we go forward. I guess even Xavier Worthy falling into that group as well, even though I don't think he plays at 165 pounds. I think he went down to that to try and run that 4.214. I think he's mid 170s, and then it's probably run like a 4.28. Like, oh no, if he's like 10 pounds heavier or whatever, maybe even still faster. I'm wondering how much, like, whether it's earlier guys or day 2 or day 3 guys, like the smaller framed guys who do have technical ability and nuance to their game, but again, are outliers from a size and frame perspective. I'm wondering how much of like the bucking of the trend we continue to see. And I put Gold and Taj Washington, both of those guys kind of in that category. And like, I'm interested to see, I don't know, do we start to see archetype changes when people come to like look at wide receivers in the NFL?
Yeah, it's almost like last year was walking out on the battlefield to test for landmines, and like, some teams took the gamble on the outlier receivers that were good at everything else, and for the most part it's kind of worked out. Although it's funny because I think at this point we would say it worked out. I still think that a lot of the issues, or at least with some of these players, that they, we had concerns about them as prospects, I think showed up on their NFL tape. Like with Tank Dell, it wasn't a tape thing, but he got injured, which was a big concern.
Yeah,
So
but it was like a fluke. Like, he's blocking on a duo run, and like, I feel like
right.
most guys' legs are going to snap at that point.
No, yeah, I'm with you.
But it was
just
annoying to be
trying
like,
to get
oh,
into the head of like NFL teams and how they might view it. And like Jordan Addison, I thought my biggest issue was press coverage, and he was, I've never seen anything like it. He's excellent at everything except he just gets dominated by press. Yeah. It's insane. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that influences them. Do we see someone like Jacob Coing go a lot higher than is being projected? Because once you get into day 3, like as good as this receiver class is, I think once you get into day 3, it starts to look like last year's class with the size of some of these receivers.
Fair point. I'm not going to add on too much here because we spoke about a bunch of the guys that were in this category for me. My favorite day 2 wide receivers are Javon Baker and Jermaine Burton. My favorite day 3 wide receivers, one is Taj Washington. My other is Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, the wide receiver from Georgia. I just think he's an option at his size and frame, pushing 6'1", 200 pounds. And how he wins, I think he gives you a day 3 option that could potentially become like an X boundary type wide receiver for you. He was really good at off frame catches. I think he's got more suddenness than he gets credit for. He's really good at the catch point, separating at the catch point, contested catches. Guys are trying to rip through like and punch through the hands, and he's still coming down with it. I think given, and rightfully so, like given McConkey and Bowers and Mims, like some of those high profile pieces on that Georgia offense, he's very much kind of lost in that conversation. I liked some of what he did at the Senior Bowl with seeing him in person as well. And he's a guy who doesn't get a ton of targets. And so you have to you almost have to watch every single game that he played in to get like a full sample size and share. Cause it's not like, oh, I can watch 6 games. It's like, no, you could watch 6 games and he maybe only had like 3 targets and 3 catches in each of those to try and get that full perspective. But he's a day 3 guy that I like with the size and the frame and the ball skills and how he wins and separates. And a lot of times he's making contested catches, not because he's not separating, but the ball isn't being put in like an ideal place. Like he's running an in-breaker and he separates. And, this was one against Missouri. And I think it's either Rakestraw or Abrams Drain who was trying to cover him. And he beats him, separates, goes across the middle, and is open. And the ball needs to be put out here, and it gets put behind him. And he has to jump, reaches back, plucks it as Abrams Drain is punching through and trying to rip it. And he brings it down, takes it. Like I see those catches from him regularly against a variety of opponents, and doing it in the SEC gets me excited. He's a day 3 guy that I really like for a while, and I don't see a lot of people talking about as well. So he's a guy that I do like.
He's one of the best run blockers in this class. It would be him and Keon Coleman, I think. Would be my 2 top.
I was going to say they are I've got a couple for Baker where he's had some nice run blocks, but I've literally got like montages for Coleman and Rosemy-Jacksaint because of their run blocking. And it's not like, oh, like that's a nice block. Like Coleman and Jacksaint put dudes in the dirt. Like they bury, whether it's a corner, linebackers, safeties, like they'll dig out a safety and put him in the ground. Like, and I think from Coleman, you kind of expected more because he is even larger. But yeah, Jackson is not just a dog, like he's a monster and like violent as a run blocker, which is an aspect of his game I really, really, really like. Now, let's shift gears, pivot a little bit here. A player or players that you think will unexpectedly fall versus their projection. It could be somebody that's supposed to go top 10 that you think falls into the late 20s. It could be a surefire round one lock that you think goes in round 2 or round 3 or 2 to 3, whatever you got. Who is like, it could be one guy, it could be multiple. What do you got for this one?
All right, so I had multiple guys. How about I list them, and then you can ask me specifically about anyone that you're interested in. So these are 6 players that I think are going to go lower than consensus has them. Center Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon, wide receiver Roman Wilson out of Michigan, Washington edge rusher Braylon Trice, Texas tight end Jatavian Sanders, Western Kentucky receiver Malachi Corley, and Penn State edge rusher Adisa Isaac.
Ooh, all right. I kind of want to ask you about like all, but we don't have enough time for that. I'm gonna stick with 2. Let's start with your first one, Jackson Powers Johnson, because I talked about him last week on the show, and yeah, there's been some rumblings in general that he might kind of fall and not be kind of. I do like Graham Barton a ton, and I feel like there's a chance he may have supplanted him as like that top interior guy. Although he has played tackle, he played center early in his career at Duke and kind of projects to that spot. But why do you think Mr. Jackson Powers Johnson, Mr. JPJ, why do you think he falls?
Yeah, so with Jackson Powers Johnson, honestly, the other 5 guys that I listed, I think are going to fall just based on my personal evaluation, and that I'm much lower on them than they're getting talked about. With Jackson Powers Johnson, like I have him as my 34th ranked player. I don't have an issue with him in the late first round. As far as interior guys, like I have Christian Haynes, Graham Barton, Talise Fuaga, who I view as a guard ahead of him. But as far as just a pure center, like to me, he's clearly the top guy. It's really just like reading the tea leaves, seeing Mel Kiper do a 2-round mock draft with Jackson Powers Johnson not in it kind of raises my eyebrows. I've heard like Dane Brugler make comments that there could be some injury concerns with him. I think on tape, I don't see too many red flags with Jackson Powers Johnson. Kind of like Bo Nix in the sense that his pass blocking stats are a little bit inflated. Like he only allowed 1 pressure last year, but I don't feel like he faced too many difficult one-on-one pass blocking assignments. But then you watch him at the Senior Bowl and he was lights out. So yeah, I really like Jackson Powers Johnson. It's mainly just everything that seems to be coming out is that the NFL's not as high on him as some other people.
Yeah, and that's fair. I was similar boat. Like I watched the tape going into the Senior Bowl, and then I saw him day 1, loved him. Watched more tape of him that night, loved him more, and I just figured he was going to be like a top 25 kind of lock. And it's weird when there's this much smoke, there's fire in some regard. So I think that's a fair aspect. Malachi Corley, talk about him. And actually Roman Wilson as well, because I feel like a lot of people, and I want to start with Corley because it's hard to get tape on Western Kentucky. And what I have seen, sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, but I haven't loved it. But because I haven't had enough sample size, I haven't had too much of a thought, although I did see him at the Senior Bowl in person. And I like some of what I saw from a separation standpoint, contested catch standpoint, separating at the catch point in addition to separating at the stem. You didn't get to really see a lot of the yards after catch stuff with him because you're not playing full contact, but he's somebody that I haven't been completely wowed by. And Roman Wilson's an interesting one for me because I loved him at the Senior Bowl, but I watched the tape and I'm not completely like floored and in love with him like I was seeing him in person at the Senior Bowl. So talk about Corley and talk about Roman Wilson.
So Corley is probably, I think, yeah, I mean, these are the 2 receivers that I'm lowest on relative to consensus. I think with Corley, I was expecting at the bare minimum Rondale Moore level yak production and dynamic with the ball in his hands type of stuff. And he's powerful after the catch. He's got good contact balance, has that running back build, and he'll truck players, finish through contact, do all that kind of stuff. But I don't think he's particularly dynamic after the catch. And I don't know that a 5'10", 215, whatever pounds he is, receiver with his athletic traits and skills with the ball in his hands, I don't know that warrants feeding him targets in an NFL offense. Like, if you're an NFL offense and you draft Malachi Corley and you decide it's worth it to give him 8 screen targets a game, I feel like that only speaks to how destitute your receiver position is. Like, I don't really think that I think he's a really good college yak threat. I don't think that it's anything special in the NFL. And then when you get to his route running, he has some decent fluidity to get in and out of breaks. Like, he's not stiff by any means, but very unpolished as a route runner, defaults to physicality at the top of the route instead of actually trying to avoid the receiver and break cleanly. He's much more comfortable just kind of barreling into contact and, hoping that can knock them off balance and stuff. And then he is one of the worst receivers at the top of this class at the catch point. Doesn't look comfortable tracking the ball over his shoulder deep down the sideline. Not someone that really maximizes his size at the catch point and high points the ball. So yeah, to me, it's like an early 4th round type of grade on Malachi Corley. And, I obviously I'm biased because it's my opinion, but I feel like the NFL would, watch the tape and agree with that, which, like, I would say that about any of my opinions, but
no, that's fair. It's just funny too, because like you get a lot of highlight scouting in draft season, and his highlights are so impressive for people that he was one of the ones early on where it was like, man, Malachi Corley, Malachi Corley, Malachi Corley. And I feel like as the process has gone through, some of that hype has kind of died out a little bit potentially, and the majority of any liking that I have for him comes from, again, seeing him at the Senior Bowl and watching him do more real wide receiver stuff. Like, I was like, okay, like I didn't have any expectations for him because I hadn't seen a bunch of tape on him going into it. But watching him in his stem work, watching him separate on the break, I was like, okay, like, to your point, the polish wasn't there. I wasn't looking at him being like, wow, this is another Lad McConkey right here. And I think he overall is more of like a power and physical guy, which doesn't, from a play style standpoint, doesn't necessarily translate to precision and technicality, but I did see more than I necessarily expected. But yeah, like watching the stuff on TV, yeah, it's just like, okay, here's a bubble screen, here's a tunnel screen, here's a bubble screen. Okay, cool. We're just gonna try and get the ball to you on a drag route and see like what you get. It's real varied at hit or miss.
45% of his targets were either screens or jet sweeps, and then if you were to add drag routes in there, it would probably be a lot higher. And then like you look at his deep down the field stuff, they would run those little curl double moves that he does a good job selling, but it's like that's kind of fluky stuff from an evaluation standpoint. I don't know, man. There was, in the 7 or 8 games I watched, there was like one true vertical route that like looks like NFL football against press coverage, and he was being covered by a safety. So it's like, I don't know, man.
It's not ideal.
The yak archetype of receiver, the reason that everybody comps him to Deebo Samuel is because that's the one similar guy that you can comp him to without being disrespectful. Because like outside of that, you're looking at Laviska Shenault, Amari Rogers. It's, I don't know. I just don't think there's a good track record of this type of receiver working out in the NFL.
No, that's fair. And then the other one, Roman Wilson, who I think is a name that has really risen a bunch since the draft process started. How come he's one that you think will fall a little bit?
Yeah, so Roman Wilson, I had a firm day 3 grade on heading into the Senior Bowl, just purely based on the tape. Like, I kind of, watched him and I'm like, all right, it's a small receiver that's kind of fast, not a whole lot of like route running nuance. He's got good hands. I'll take that in the fifth
super run
round or
heavy
something.
offense, so he's not even
Yeah,
getting a ton of like routes and targets and everything.
right. Yeah, and Jim Harbaugh, is it Jim or John? Jesus,
Jim.
Jim, right?
I
Yeah.
do that all the time too. I
Oh
always
god.
confuse my
Um,
Harbaughs. It's so rough. Yeah, Jim.
he did a terrible job of making it easy for us to evaluate anyone besides
Man.
running backs in
Yeah,
that offense.
I would say if you want to evaluate Blake Corum, like you really only need one game because he's got like 70 carries every
Yeah.
game. So boom, you're good.
So for Roman Wilson, I think that based on his build and kind of the style of player that I was expecting him to be a lot more refined of a route runner, but I felt like he was pretty inefficient, getting out of the stem and cutting off, breaking cleanly, kind
Mm,
of similar to Malachi Corley in the sense that he floats into contact, drifts into contact at the top of the route more than he probably should. Really struggles with press coverage when he does face it. But I really like the straight line speed. He can pull away from defenders. He's got good hands if it's an open target. But when I project his role to the NFL, like day one, I think he can win on deep overs if he's
mhm.
not getting press coverage.
It's very
And then
specific.
what else? So
Yeah.
like maybe I could see him getting like 550 yards in a Shanahan type of offense or something.
Mm,
And then if he develops, that's the reason that I do have an early fourth round grade on him, is that if he
okay.
can develop some of that route running polish, and like what we saw at the Senior Bowl where he was pretty much uncoverable, which is why I raised him, about a round and a half. It feels like the arrow is kind of pointing up for him, and I can definitely see an avenue for him to be, a number 2 receiver for sure. But I don't really know that the NFL is going to value smaller receivers that aren't already put together as route runners.
Yeah. And I didn't watch his tape going into the Senior Bowl. And I'd seen him a bunch on broadcast, but broadcast doesn't count. But I just didn't get to his tape before the Senior Bowl. And I came away from the Senior Bowl going, man, I can't wait to watch his tape. And then I had to watch so many because majority of his games, he's got like 4 or less targets, like if that. Like the first game I went to was the Purdue game. So I think he had like 11 targets and like 9 catches. And I was like, okay, I just want to see some volume right from the get-go. And I just didn't see, to your point, like I didn't see the clean precision route running and stem work that I saw at the Senior Bowl. And so I was like, oh, well, okay, how much of it is the offense? How much is it, again, tied to Harbaugh and what they were doing? Because just what he did at the Senior Bowl, even just from a drill work, like his drill work was impressive. The feet, the ankle flexion, again, everything was clean and precise. It was 90-degree cuts. It was tight. There wasn't any drifting. There wasn't any inefficiency in his movement. Everything was clean and tight and sharp. And I just didn't see that at Michigan. And it's funny you mentioned like the deep overs, like that's the majority of what he's running against Purdue. And it's like, okay, sometimes they're open and sometimes they're not. And okay, like the safety came down and they're running single high because they're worried about Blake Corum, and he runs across the field and he's open. I just didn't see that level of technicality that I thought I was going to get coming out of the Senior Bowl. And I liked what I saw at the Senior Bowl a bunch. To your point, like he was uncomfortable, like Quinyon or uncoverable. Quinyon Mitchell, who had a tremendous Senior Bowl as well, he got him several times in one-on-ones and different pieces that really, perked my antennas up and put him even more on my radar. But yeah, I just didn't see it on the tape like I did in person. And it's super frustrating because I still kind of don't know what to do with him.
For me, like for a receiver prospect, for every position, there's a few things that can't be the first thing on your strength section. For receivers, it's your first strength can't be was uncoverable at the Senior Bowl. Because like we've seen Andy Isabella before. Like if that's the first thing, if that's like your biggest strength, I'm sorry. It's like
I'm out. Yeah.
it's like with an edge rusher. If the first thing is can shoot into gaps, it's like okay, that
plays the run real well, or like hustles,
like
or great motor.
Offensive lineman, can get out on the move as a puller. It's like okay.
Dude really was uncoverable at the Senior Bowl. Damn, that's wild. Yeah, that's funny. That's fair though. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. A position of interest for this Bills team. They bring back Taylor Rapp. Then they sign Mike Edwards. Mike Edwards is on a 1-year deal. This is still a position that is going through a transition period with no more Jordan Poyer, no more Micah Hyde. This safety class is wonky. I want to get your thoughts and your takes on it because I feel like you really could ask 10 people their thoughts on the safety class, and you could get 10 different top fives, 10 different safety ones. There's a lot of risers and fallers. The combine heavily affected some guys. So let's start with who your top 5 safeties are right now.
So I have Cooper DeJean as a safety.
Oh, okay.
So he would be my number 1 safety in this class. I think there's certain schemes that he could fit in at corner. I have him 42nd overall.
Okay.
I think that, when you look at his athletic traits, I would expect him to have a high RAS score. I think he's got good straight line speed when it comes to, downhill, breaking on a hitch or returning a punt. But the biggest issue I saw was some hip tightness when he's trying to turn and accelerate, starting facing the receiver. And then also, being able to sync with comebacks, I thought was an issue for him. Didn't seem that comfortable playing the ball with his back to the quarterback. And I played a lot more press coverage over the second half of the season, but didn't look that comfortable in it. I just think it's a lot cleaner fit moving him to safety. So I've got him at safety 1. And then I'll just run through the rest of my top 5. Jaden Hicks at safety 2, Tyler Nubin at 3. I've got Javon Bullard at 4 and Cole Bishop out of Utah at 5.
Sell me on Jaden Hicks.
So if you ignoring Cooper DeJean, out of all of the traditional safeties in this class, he's the one that has the prototypical size and athletic traits profile. Tyler Nubin is big, but he's slow. Javon Bullard is fast and explosive, but he's small. Cole Bishop actually tested a lot faster than I expected him to.
Yeah.
That moved him up a couple spots for me. But he's got really short arms. He's tall and kind of big, but Jaden Hicks is like the one prototype safety. He's got outstanding ball skills. He's a very aggressive run defender. I think too aggressive at times when it comes to some pretty bad tackling angles. He has man coverage versatility. He can stick with slot fades. He has, I think, linebacker block shedding skills. He's got closing burst, special teams experience. You see him blocking field goals. I just think he's a very well-rounded safety. Biggest issue with him is the tackling, which is writing up all these safeties. It's like probably 80% of them, I say, I've got to just come up with different ways of saying that they're bad tacklers, essentially. But so that's my pitch, my elevator pitch for Jaden Hicks.
He's one who he had a great deep rep where I think he takes it away from Jalen Polk in the Washington game. I think they're playing quarters. He picks up Polk, takes him downfield. And from what I saw from him, I always just see him more in the box and more of like a box safety. But he's so physical. He's such an enforcer. He's got some reps where he is just absolutely wrecking dudes. And I haven't finalized my safety rankings. And so I wanted to get your take because I'm literally all over the place when it comes to who I'm putting in, and actually before I even say that, let me get to, for your favorite safeties in this class. Is it one of those guys in the top 5? Is it somebody else that you really gravitate towards? Because someone my favorite safety in this class is not one of my top 5, and it's somebody more like a day 3 guy. So I wanted to get your thought on that as well.
Yeah. So just for perspective on how I have this class kind of sorted, I don't have any safety in my top 40. But then between 44 and 100, I've got 9 safeties. So there's nothing at the top. But then once you get into the 3rd to late 4th round, I think there's a ton of guys. I really like Keaton Oladapo. I really like Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest. But I think my guy at safety would have to be Tyke Smith out of Georgia.
Oh, okay.
kind of, I've got him as a safety. He played more of a slot corner role in
Yeah,
Georgia's
he's like that
defense.
apex, like big nickel for Georgia.
Yeah, kind of like the Brian Branch type of role. He is the most violent block shedder of any defensive back in this class besides Jarvis Brownlee Jr. out of Louisville. Tyke Smith just uproots and demolishes tight ends, receivers. Like there's so many reps where he's blowing guys 5 yards
Yeah.
backwards. It's insane. So I think what he can give you as a run defender, protecting against screen passes is extremely valuable in today's NFL. But he also has some really good man coverage traits. He's got fluid mirror skills. He does a good job of, uh, you know, as much as you can tell from the grainy all 22, I feel like he has good eye discipline as far as reading the receiver's hips, and feeling out route breaks. And yeah, I mean, I think that Tyke Smith is someone that has role versatility where he can come down in the slot. He could be a quarter safety. Probably not, doesn't have elite range as being like a single high guy, but he's someone that I'm a big fan of in this class, and don't see him getting talked about that often.
I wanted to get your thoughts on like some of his range stuff. You kind of answered it for me already. He's one that I find really intriguing because of kind of more the projection of him. Like the heavy majority of his career snaps have come at like that apex slot type of role. And I think he's got more reps at outside corner and defensive line, like just because he's following somebody out in man coverage or he's blitzing off the line. He's got more reps at either of those than he does as like an actual deep safety. But again, some of that is okay. You've got Javon Bullard, you've got Malachi Starks. Those are going to be like your deep safeties, and then Tyke is playing this quasi linebacker. But yeah, like just how he functions around the box. The thing I keep saying about him is I wished he was like 25 pounds heavier and can just straight up be a linebacker, because I love how he plays like anywhere sideline to sideline and in and around the box. And the projection for him I find really interesting because yeah, like it's projection, which every person in this draft is projection. There's no guarantees for anyone. But yeah, I'm very interested to see like where he goes and what becomes of him because of not having a ton of snaps as like as a single high safety or even like a two high safety type look because of that role that he played more at Georgia. That's a really interesting one. His name's been creeping up a little bit in some Bills circles, so I like that. My favorite safeties in this class, you mentioned one, Malik Mustafa. Dude is just a freight train coming downhill and fitting the run at the line of scrimmage, fitting the run from depth. Like, just he's lighting everybody up. It doesn't matter who you are or where he's coming from, you are getting rocked. And I think his range is better than he gets credit for. He's got several reps against Clemson, especially against Florida State, where he's playing a post safety and he's getting to the sideline. He's there to make plays. He's got a real nice play in a deep post where they run it over in front of him and he's honoring it. And then the post comes behind him. Travis opens up and chucks it downfield, and he opens and takes off and makes a dive and swat, like leaning back downfield. He has a couple really great hits in that game too. Like, he's just so fast and violent, and I like his game, and I think it'll translate well. I also think he's a good special teamer. Probably my favorite safety in this class, and this one's massive projection, and I don't know what he's going to be because of his size. I love Jalen Simpson out of Auburn. Like, he had a really good Senior Bowl week, but then I go to the tape, and he's matching and closing down on Brock Bowers and punching through. He's breaking up plays on Malik Neighbors. A lot of that comes from his history as playing a corner. He was corner the first 3 years at Auburn, and then was a safety this year. But from a coverage standpoint, he can play spot drop. He can match. His reading and processing of route distributions is so well. Like, he knows it's either he's reading it so well on the fly and processing it, or his film study habits are so great because he's beating guys to the spot and to the point regularly in that Auburn defense. 1 year starting experience at safety, had 4 interceptions this past year. He's mossing I forget who against Georgia early in that game against Georgia before he makes that play on Bowers later. But my worry with him is 1 year of starting experience as safety, and he's under 180 pounds. how much can he put on that frame? Can he get to 185? Can he kind of push 90 or 190? Also within that, not a ton of experience in terms of fitting the run, in terms of what they asked him to do. Like, so he's got to still work on that aspect, like not only in terms of angles to the football and fitting it and being sound, but then being able to make the play when you get there. Because if you're playing at 180 pounds, that's going to be a tough sell against like a lot of NFL running backs, unless you're playing against like James Cook every week potentially. But from a coverage standpoint, there's so much I love about him. I have, a day 3 grade on him. I just wonder like how I don't even know if he can be anything in the NFL because I don't know if that size plays, but I just love the coverage tape so much. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. Happens to me all the time.
My bad. Yeah, the Georgia game I think might be one of the best individual performances from any safety in this class. Yeah. Just and like that was the first one that I watched. So kind of started off really high on him, and then every other game I sort of come back down to earth. Not that his tape's bad, it's just you see him bounce off of tackles some when he comes down to fit the run, and it's like, yeah, man, 179 pounds. That's 0.4th percentile for safety.
That's not good.
It's not good.
It's not good.
So yeah, man, I don't know. I've got a late fifth round grade on him, so he's safety 13 for me. One of those where it's like, if I'm a GM, I might just let someone else see what happens with Jalen Simpson.
I like the idea of the fit with the Bills because you've got Edwards and Rapp this year, right? So take him, see how much you can fatten him up, and see what you can do.
He's got 32 and 3/8 inch arms, so theoretically, like a frame to maybe get up to 185, 190.
And see, that's it. Like get him up to, and it's like what can you get him to? Like
get him up to 3rd percentile weight.
Yeah, right. Can you just get him on the scale? Can you just get him like track on the board in some way, shape, or form? Like he's just an outlier from that physical standpoint, and which is a huge detractor. But I just love his coverage tape so much. I want him to go somewhere where he has a chance to start next year or the season after. Yeah, just get him a year to fatten him up, continue to work on like. What does encourage me though is like his angles to the ball from only being in safety in 1 year. I was just really impressed, like both in coverage and even coming forward, his routes and angles to the ball were efficient. But then, if he's playing the run, it's like, he's getting there, but he not really finishing all the time because he's 178 pounds, and that ain't necessarily going to fly. Last segment here, and then we'll get you on your way. Day 2 and early day 3, defensive tackles and edges. This is a position of need for the Buffalo Bills. Could be somewhere that they go in the first round. If I doubt Byron Murphy's going to fall, but maybe if Johnny Newton falls, could be an option there at 28. A lot of Bills fans love Braden Fisk. You get some love for Michael Hall, some love for Dwayne Carter, Mason Smith from LSU. A lot of names that are kind of circulating at defensive tackle, and then edges are kind of all over the place, like, and take out the big 3 of Turner and Verse and Latu, and you kind of get like pick them from any fan. Ask 10 fans who they like at edge, you'll get 10 different answers. Who are some guys for you? We'll start with defensive tackle. Who are some guys you like on day 2 and early day 3 on the interior there?
So for defensive tackle, are you looking more at like a penetrating 3-tech or a nose tackle?
Let's do penetrating 3-tech, because I think with Daquan Jones and then signing Austin Johnson, they're good there at the 1-tech and the nose. They really need somebody behind Ed Oliver, so you're looking for that 3-tech.
Yeah, so for the 3-techs, my half serious answer would be anyone but Braden Fisk.
Damn, okay.
Yeah, not a big Braden Fisk fan. I'll put that out there. If I had to pick like one of those types of players, I would go Michael Hall Jr.,
nice.
Mekhi Wingo, or Ruka Roro.
Okay, I'm a huge Michael Hall guy. Like just the explosion you see on tape, like he's jumping gaps because of his lateral explosion and agility. Like his swim move is one of the quickest, and it's violent. Like everything he does is just quick and fast and violent. And I wonder how much he holds up. Initially in the season, he was listed at like 280 pounds. He weighed in at 290 at the combine. I think at his pro day, he weighed in at 299. I have to go back and check what he weighed in at the Senior Bowl because I have those numbers, but I didn't write it down. He's somebody who I'm a big fan of, and I just think from a rotational aspect, you want to give Ed Oliver a break, or really anybody. If you're looking for a backup, like rotational 3-tech, just let him go in for like 7 to 8 snaps and play 100 miles an hour 100% of the time and penetrate and attack and go forward. And you got yourself cooking something right there. Talk a little bit about Braden Fisk, because he's a very popular name for Bills fans, but for you, not so much.
Yeah, so he's a very high effort, just like relentless motor type of player. He's got the elite athletic testing. I always, with these defensive linemen that have, 10th percentile weight, 20th percentile weight, and then they're like 80th percentile in all the movement drills. It's like, it's not that isn't a great athlete, but it should be expected, that they're going to test really well. Now, still, for 292 pounds, great testing, and like you see the movement skills on tape with his ability to shoot gaps and slip around unblocked opportunities. But it's kind of like what I was saying with before with an edge rusher, where it's like the main thing that you do can't be shoot gaps, because in the NFL, teams are going to block you. And when Braden Fisk gets blocked, the results are a lot worse. He kind of gets transported down the field in the run game, like especially if it's a double team, but even single blocks, he will just get moved. He's got so many tackles on tape where it's a bad rep because he made the tackle, but it was after he got moved back 8 yards, and then he like finally disengages and makes the tackle. I think the pass rushing skill set, he's quick with his hands, but I don't really see any advanced plan as a pass rusher. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he's very effective at freeing himself from contact. A two-hand punch can pretty much end his rep. Most of his production, like I said, was unblocked on stunts or just pursuit type of sacks. Like everyone, if you criticize Braden Fisk, there's a bat signal that goes up, and everybody tells you to watch the Louisville game, and it's like, okay, he got 3 sacks or whatever off of stunts. He made like a really nice tackle for loss early in the game. Had a couple of nice plays against the run in that game, but that's like kind of I felt like from an evaluation standpoint, there's not a whole lot there that it really projects for me. So I see him as like a Carl Klug type that can maybe be a third defensive lineman, just come in and scream off the line of scrimmage like a maniac and just like wreck stuff in the backfield. But he's not someone that is going to, hold up at the point of attack and be a full-time player, in my opinion, which I think to me that takes you off the table as a top 3 round type of pick.
I think it's fair. That's fair if that's like what your evaluation piece is. And my favorite aspect for him is his get off. Like, he's got such quickness, but to your point, like if he's not winning with that, how else is he winning consistently? And I love the get off, but again, some of the pieces, and you mentioned some of the metrics. So his wingspan puts him in the 5th percentile, and his arm length of 31 inches, which is my biggest concern with him. He's 3rd percentile with arm length, and you see it hurt him regularly. Like, he's not going to be winning first touch. Guys, even on the interior, like where guys have shorter arms than tackles, like centers and guards, they're going to win first touch on him because their arms are going to be longer than his. So he almost has to win with that get off, or he has to win with that motor, or he has to win every rep with leverage, because dudes are going to get their hands on him first. And then to your point, like even if they don't, what kind of moves or arsenal does he have? So I think that's very fair. I think it's a very fair aspect. Let's go to edges, and then we'll get you out of here. Favorite day 2 and early day 3 guys at the edge spot.
So I would say for a firm day 2 guy, I would say Marshawn Nealand. And then as more of an early day 3 guy, I think this is a really weak edge class. To be honest, especially when you get outside of the top 3. But I would go, the one guy that I really like on early day 3 is Mo Kamara out of Colorado State.
Nice. What about Darius Robinson? You putting him at defensive tackle, or you putting him at edge?
Yeah, I like Darius Robinson a lot. He's my edge 4. I don't see him as like a 3 tech type of player. As far as what he does on third down, you can line up anyone on the inside if you know it's a passing, if you know they're going to pass. But yeah, I
Absolutely.
think he's definitely like a 5 technique defensive end type of player. Um, I think that he's a really tough evaluation because he doesn't really have the explosiveness
Mhm.
to, I think, consistently threaten the corner, but he's I think I don't think people give him enough credit for how good he is with his hands. Just because this is his first year playing edge, people kind of throw him into this bucket of like project type of player, but um you really started to see his pass rushing skill set come together and diversify as the season progressed. You watch some early games, he's just basically spamming the swim pull through uh,
Mhm.
type of move. But like I would for anybody watching tape at home, I would recommend the Ohio State game is where you get like a really good
Mm.
sense of how many different ways he can win. He's using forklift, double swipe, cross chop. Really impressed with his ability at his height to get low in his bull rush and really leverage people backwards. So I just think, and then he's going to be a good run defender.
Mhm.
Really, my biggest issue with him at edge rusher is that if he's being forced to cover a lot of space, like from the hash to the sideline, he can do some short area movement stuff against read options, but he doesn't really have the range to cover a mobile quarterback out to the sideline, and you'll see him lose the edge sometimes. So that's probably my biggest negative for him.
Yeah, I have concerns about like the overall speed and range piece to his game and change direction stuff as well. But I like that you have him at edge 4. I like him and I'm keeping him at edge. I just think with the power, the arm length, a compression style power rusher who has a legit ability to like collapse the width of the pocket with that arm length and with that power. And I loved your analysis of it, like watching him progress through the year, like everything early on is just either long arm or push pull. And the push pull works to his credit. Like he's winning first touch, he extends, violently sheds you, and then he gets through. And then I think it's the LSU game, maybe the Florida game. No, I think it's LSU. He pulls a cross chop and turns the corner and flattens. And I was like, oh. And then the more I watched him, like, okay. And I just like him because from a baseline standpoint, you're getting a guy who, minimum right now, power rusher, compression, and exactly your point, he's going to play the run and he's going to do it well. He knows how to leverage gaps. He knows how to control his space. He can win and control his gap and penetrate with it, or he can two gap for you. I also think playing in that Missouri defense, being in that like stack and that 3-3-5 type a lot, odd front, like isn't really helping him where he's playing as a 4-eye or sometimes he's kicking inside. I think if you give him, to your point, more reps outside, you put him in a 5 and allow him to just go on an angle and crush tackles. If you're trying to block him with the tight end, it's not going to work because he's going to beat any tight end that he comes across because of how violent and big that he is. He crushes running backs who try to block him. But again, there is like that range space type of aspect. Like you don't want to do a ton of simulateds with him and drop him into coverage. He's got a good surf technique as far as his eyes, but then if the QB keeps it, it's going to be hard for him to really get that angle, and there's a chance they're going to be able to turn the corner on him because, again, the speed, range, and lack of change of direction.
The
But
quarterback should always keep it
I was going to say,
on.
if you're
Yeah.
if you see that, I don't care what he does, even if he doesn't move, keep it and just run
Yep.
because you could probably get the corner on him. But I'm in agreement with you on a lot of pieces for him. I apologize because we went over the time, but
No
this
problem.
conversation got deep and into the weeds. You were tremendous. I'm going to keep going on, but we'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Just in case people were tuning in later, didn't see the beginning, plug anything and everything you got, who you are, where they can find your work, shows, Twitter, anything and everything. The floor is yours. Tell everybody whatever you want.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at No Flags Film, and on YouTube I do film breakdowns and scouting reports at A to Z Sports Film Room on YouTube.
Appreciate the hell out of you. I'll see you on the Twitter and on the internet and in the DMs. You crushed it as I knew you would and hoped you would. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I appreciate you and Godspeed.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Later. Great guest, Mr. James Foster. Getting into the weeds. I honestly wanted to dive into more, but I didn't want to keep him too long more than I already did. I saw something that came into the chat earlier, and then I saw something briefly when I was going through. I had to pull something from my notes for Twitter. What did Stephon Diggs say? Did Stephon Diggs say something that was like, is it crypto Stephon Diggs or cryptic Stephon Diggs, or did he say something real? Anybody that's watching live want to throw it up into the chat. Feel free to, and then I want to continue to go on with some pieces in this episode while somebody potentially throws that into the chat, or questions, thoughts, comments, concerns on anything or anything and everything having to do with the Bills draft board, prospects you like, position groupings you want to talk about, questions for me, questions you want to throw out into the ether, whatever you folks got, feel free to throw it up into the chat. We'll kind of go through the live chat and talk about some stuff as we go home on this episode. RJ saying James was great. Yeah, James is awesome. Just nothing. There's no fluff with anything James does. It's straight into the point. Like, I like this guy because of this. I don't like this guy because of this. He backs it all up with film and he shows his work, rightly or wrongly. Yeah, we started interacting, I think like 2 years ago in like the draft season, maybe like February, March. He was posting a bunch of stuff. I was posting a bunch of stuff. We just started talking about prospects, and yeah, he does really, really good work. Let's see what, and as we do this, as we start to ride on, want to bring up some love for the show sponsor. I mentioned it earlier, but One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Delicious sweet sauce pie, cup of char pepperoni, great cheese to sauce ratio, homemade blue cheese. They do catering. They do a whole bunch of aspects. They do a breakfast pizza that is absolutely delicious and tremendous. They're expanding multiple aspects of the business. They do a bunch for the community in terms of charity events and partnering with the SPCA, partnering with the Alzheimer's Foundation, Toys for Tots, partner with Roswell to try to knock out cancer. They give back in a multitude of ways. So they're really good people making really good food. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube and or whichever podcasting app platform you are listening to this show on. John says, I only go to 2 Pie Pizza. I guess 2 Pie Pizza is probably better than 1 Pie. That's fair. I got to see what this, hold on. I got to see what this Diggs tweet says. What does Stephon Diggs say? Okay, so RG3 said, is Stephon Diggs essential to Josh Allen's success? Oh, and then somebody commented and said, does Josh benefit from having a top-tier receiver? Yes. Is he essential to his success? No. And then Diggs commented, you sure? Oh, man. Oh, man. I'm not even, interesting. Let's go to this question here from the chat. Say the Bills draft a wide receiver in round 1. Which wide receivers would have to be available in round 2 for you to be okay with a double dip? Ooh, this is a really good question. If they go wide receiver in round 1, I don't know if I want to go wide receiver round 2 at all. It would have to be like some combination of, okay, they went with A.D. Mitchell in round 1, and then Jermaine Burton would have to be there at 60, or Ladd McConkey would have to be there at 60. I want to say Javon Baker, but I feel like there might be some positional redundancy there. But but even that, I like Baker so much, I don't really care. It would have to be like Baker or Burton or McConkey. There's a lot of round 2 receivers that I like, but in terms of a double dip, it's got to be somebody that the fit works in addition to be a good player, in addition to being a good player, because that means you are foregoing defensive tackle, edge, safety, interior offensive line, like a multitude of other spots potentially, just because you are hitting on that spot. Yeah, it would have to be, or maybe like, I don't think he's going to fall, but like, it would have to be like Xavier Legette, like somebody who I really like just fell for some reason. Like Ladd McConkey fell to 60. Javon Baker, Xavier Legette fell, or Ricky Pearsall fell to 60. It would have to be somebody that I think like is a top tier type of dude. Even again, if there is positional redundancy, fine. If the value's there or a player is great, I don't care. But yeah, it would have to be somebody of like a really high tier. And you followed up saying Bean has double dip. It's not probable, but not impossible. No, absolutely not. Like Bean goes by best player available and value. And if that's what it is, it's what it is. Maybe I have a little bit of PTSD because that last double dip, really was Rousseau and Basham, and I was not a fan of that Basham pick whatsoever. But that doesn't mean this double dip wouldn't work out. And there are so many good receivers. I think you could hit on two potentially, but then it just gets worrisome because you're and then Spin said what I was exactly going to say. You're double dipping, and then you don't have that third round pick, so you're going on two receivers in the first 60, pick 28 and pick 60, and then you don't have another pick until 128. That's a lot of stuff that could help your team kind of going by the wayside. So that's why for me, like if it's a double dip, it's got to be something extremely strong where somebody awesome fell. Like you got Brian Thomas in the first round, or you got A.D. Mitchell, and then Ladd McConkey fell, or Jermaine Burton is there and he's checked out everything from an off the field perspective, or Javon Baker is there, or it would have to be somebody who like really, really, really moves the needle for me personally, in order to double dip at that wide receiver spot. Especially too, because I think if you wanted to double dip at wide receiver, you could take one in round one and then still get a fun wide receiver on day 3. You could get Taj Washington or even Malik Washington or Marcus Jack Saint. Like there are other guys, or Anthony Gould, like James mentioned. Like I think you could double dip early and then also on day 3 and still get a really fun combo without having to double dip early. But if you do double dip in round 1 and round 2 at pick 60, then it's just got to be somebody of really high value, like somebody who we didn't think was going to fell. Kind of like Osiris Torrance last year. I don't think anybody thought he was going to be on the board when the Bills were picking in the second round. He was, so they took him. So it would have to be somebody that's still sitting there that, okay, cool. What else do we have? Bill, let's go in order here. Bill says, is there a number of first round grades you have given? 15, 20, 25 plus, hopefully. I'm not done with my board. Usually most years you have about 16 to 20 first round grades. I will be falling into that range. Some things that I'm solidified on. I've got 3 wide receivers with a first round grade. It's only the big 3: Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze. I have a ton of wide receivers with a round 2 grade, which is why I'd be fine taking a lot of guys at 28. Well, a certain amount of guys at 28. I've only got 2 defensive tackles with a first round grade. That's Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton. I've only got 3 edges with a first round grade. That is Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, and Laiatu Latu. I struggle with Latu though, because there's certain aspects of his game that I don't like. The biggest thing in the first round that I have a bunch of first round grades on is offensive linemen. Like there are a ton who I just really, really, really like in this first round and some of the QBs. But I'm not done with my big board. I was sick for like a week. It knocked me back in terms of my progression of what I'm doing. I'm finishing up corners now and then circling back on some offensive line stuff. And then once I have that, it'll be there. But just on average, you usually have about 16 to 20 first round grades. I will be right in that range. Spin said, just did a mock draft, got Marvin Harrison Jr., John Newton, Tyler Dubin, and Braylon Trice, who needs draft picks next year. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Sespinar saying, what does your board look like at 28 where you would want to trade down? Ooh, that's a good question. It would have to be, it depends on the trade down, right? Like if I can trade down to 30 or 31 or 32 because I'm sitting there at 28 and A.D. Mitchell is there and Johnny Newton is there and Jackson Powers Johnson is there, and I feel like I can grab one of these guys in the early 30s and still pick up a third round pick. Cool. The option that I really like is trading to more like the mid 30s. Like you get pick 35 or 36 or 37 and then get, a third round pick with it in the 90s, something like that, right? I really, really, really want a third round pick attached to it. But in order to do that, one of those guys there's got to be no Mitchell. There's got to be no Newton. There's got to be no Jackson Powers Johnson. There's no Graham Barton. I could even be tempted to take Xavier Legette right there at pick 28. I made the case for it last week. Like there's got to be a significant amount of dudes that are gone from that spot. I also think there's some really good corners that I would potentially take at 28, even though corner isn't the biggest need. And we talked about it a bit on last week's show. I think with how many offensive linemen are going to go in the first 28 or first 27 picks, how many quarterbacks are going to go, the three edges, Quinyon Mitchell at corner, Brock Bowers at tight end, like the amount of the known quantities I think that are going to go in the first 28, someone of or first 27, I should say, someone of quality is going to fall to pick 28, which could swing the pendulum either way in the trade down aspect, right? Where there's a handful of guys that you really like. And so you can sit there and go, you know what? Let's trade back to the mid 30s because one of these guys that we really like is still probably going to be there. And we can get one of them and still pocket a third round pick out of it potentially, or more ammunition. Cool. Or the other side of that coin and the side of the argument is there's a ton of really good guys available at 28 right now. Let's get the top one that we want, and so on and so forth. And not have to worry about, are they going to be there? Who's still going to be there at that aspect? So for me, in order to trade down where I'd want to trade down, it either means all the players I was really interested in are gone, or there's just so many available that you could trade into the mid 30s and still grab one of these guys that are quality and have a similar grade and then pocket a third round pick. So it's either got to be nothing's there or everything is there. John Calvin saying, did McDermott say he has 7 wide receivers as a first round? I don't know. I didn't hear that. He may have. But yeah, I have not heard that. And yes, it does see, I do think someone will slip to 28. I think there's a chance that Johnny Newton could fall to 28. And if that happens, I really like it. Again, there's options at corner. Like if Terrion Arnold is there, I like it at 28. If Kool-Aid McKinstry is there, I like it at 28. Nate Wiggins is small, but the speed and the physicality is enticing. Like Johnny Newton, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Legette, like there are options at that spot there at 28 that they either all have to be gone or they're all there to the point where I'm like, I don't care which one of these guys we take because there's so many options. And if we trade back to pick 35 based on how I'm just making up pick 35, but if we go to pick 35 based on how the board looks, we can still get one of these guys. Cool, let's trade back and go with it. But I do think someone will slip. I don't know how many. I know there's going to be real quality there at 28. It's either going to be Johnny Newton. I don't want to say defensive tackle because I specifically mean Johnny Newton. It's either going to be Johnny Newton, someone on the interior offensive line, or one of the corners, or wide receiver. Wide receiver, I think, is the really not tricky one, but I'm interested to see how the wide receivers fall after the big three. Who's the fourth wide receiver off the board? Is it Brian Thomas? Is it A.D. Mitchell? Is it Xavier Worthy? How do NFL teams value Keon Coleman versus how a lot of people on the outside in the media are valuing Keon Coleman? How many receivers go in the first 27, right? Do the Bills have the opportunity to take the fourth wide receiver off the board at 28, or are they looking at the 6th or 7th or 5th or 8th wide receiver off the board? That's a huge piece, right? Do all 4 quarterbacks go like we anticipate? Is it Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy? Does a 5th potentially slip in there? Does a team want to trade up to 28 to get that 5th quarterback off the board? Who's still available? So on and so forth. Like there's so many unknowns from that perspective, but I do think some quality of corner, Johnny Newton, wide receiver, or interior offensive lineman will be there at pick 28. And if there's enough of that quality that's still there, cool. Why not trade back to the 30s? Again, that's an ideal situation for me. There's so much available at 28 that you can roll the dice, trade back into the 30s, potentially pick up a third round pick, and then still get a guy that you want because you have a handful of dudes that you would be happy taking any of them, and you can still get one of them in the 30s and pick up a third round pick while you do it. Bum, 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 bum. Good comment here from Walter saying, how much does the Bills value the 5th-year option that comes with the 28th selection over trading back and picking up another 4th for a premium position like wide receiver, defensive tackle, defensive end? We have to consider staying. Absolutely. Especially if you're getting somebody with that provides that long-term value, having a premium position locked up for those 5 years with that option, especially if you hit on them. Like if you hit on wide receiver, defensive tackle, or edge or corner at the end of the first round, that 5th-year option, Obviously, it's more expensive, but it's still affordable versus what the market is for that player and for that premium position potentially. So that's obviously going to have to like heavily weigh into things. And I think then you're weighing that fifth year option versus the overall team and roster construction and value that you could potentially have. It comes down to, do you really believe you're going to nail that pick at 28 and make use of that fifth year option? Or do you want as many, throws at the dartboard or swings at the plate and volume versus quality in that regard as well? And it's all weighing it out, but that's something that absolutely has to be considered. Well said there, Walter. Yeah, it's. Oh, Ralph wasn't senior with this comment saying, "Did you see Eric Wood's pod where McGovern said Bean recruited him for the center position?" Yeah, I saw he talked about something that they didn't expect more, or he didn't expect Morse to go this year or go the way that he did. But they had discussions at the end of the season with Aaron Cromer about him moving to center. And so he knew at some point he was going to be playing center. He just didn't think Morse was going to go out in this way or go out this offseason. I did see that. I thought, sorry, I muted myself too early. I thought it was very interesting, him kind of saying that. Not even just that was the plan, but him saying it. I feel like him kind of giving that peek behind the curtain was interesting because we don't really get that for anything with the Bills, with how tight-lipped they are when it comes to information. So I thought that was very interesting. Also, yeah, just considering how good Mitch Morse has been for this team, and so knowing that that was kind of the long-term plan, but again, understandable, and that's fair overall, to a degree. Comment here from John saying, "Could you see Bean trading a fourth and a fifth this year and a third next year and second in 2026? Would that get us up to 15? Man, I'd have to go through the trade charts and see. Oh, good comment here from Spin saying, according to the draft trade value charts, it will cost our entire draft class to get around to pick 14. Yeah, I'd have to consult the trade charts. It's a lot. I'm not a big fan of moving up just because I like as many swings at the plate when it comes to the draft, just because of how much of an unknown every player is. Even though you have certain guys that are known quantities, even the most known quantity is still unknown, and kind of trading the farm to bet on that aspect worries me to a degree. And I'd like as many shots as possible, but I mean, I don't know if you can trade. If Romo Dunze falls and he's sitting there at 15 or something, like I understand the people that are going to kind of voice their wants for trading up for him and going after that piece. Suspinar, how much do you consider needs in 25 and 26 for this draft? People weren't thrilled with multiple linebacker picks in past years, but maybe they always knew we weren't keeping Edmonds. So I put this Edmonds situation and the Bernard pick out on Twitter at the end of last week, and I likened it to potentially going with corner this year. Rasul Douglas is a UFA in 2025. They chose to restructure him this offseason instead of extending him and using that extension to lower the cap hit this year, which I find interesting. Your corner 3 for this year is Kyer Elam, which could work out, but also could not work out. All of those things combined, I think, make corner a sneaky play in the first round for the Bills. You get somebody that can be, at worst, your corner 3 this year, but knowing the chances and the odds that dudes get banged up in the secondary, especially Christian Benford, who continues to get banged up in a variety of ways. If you draft a corner in the first round, there's a chance they could be corner 2 or corner 1 for you at some point this season. And then even if it's not this season, you take somebody in the first round this year who's waiting in the wings to take over for Rasul Douglas next year. And so that was the exact example that went in my head. They took Terrell Bernard, maybe not necessarily knowing that they weren't going to keep Edmonds, because they did try to keep him, or maybe it was just purely best player available and they really loved the player and they loved the value and they were cool taking it no matter what. But the idea of taking somebody kind of a year before you need to was the example with Bernard. I think you could see that play out again with corner. 1, because I think there's going to be quality corners that are going to be there at 28, but 2, given the corner room this year and the unknown that Kyer Elam is, and then going forward in 2025, knowing that Rasul Douglas is a UFA. And also again for 2024, Christian Benford just, being banged up a bit. Amy says, evening, Anthony. What's up, Amy? She says, does Bean freak us Mafia out and move way up because we all know we won't use all our later picks. And the Bears alone would be interested in swapping for simply more picks. I've wondered that the idea of them finding a dance partner where they can give up some of their quantity and acquire some more quality. So again, you got like 11 picks, being able to package some of that and end up with 6 or 7 picks, but more day 2 picks or early day 3 type of picks. I don't think the Bills are going to stand pat with all 11 picks, is what I say. I either think you'll get some sort of trade up or you'll get some sort of package that nets them a 3rd round pick or an earlier 4th or some kind of pick in that regard. I just think that's what's going to end up happening. I don't think they're just going to sit on all 11 picks. If they do, I don't think that's the end of the world because, again, I like as many swings at the plate as possible, but a lot of those swings are in the 5th round and later. So I'd like more in the first 4 rounds. As many day 2 picks as I can get, I would prefer. I don't see the Bills just sitting on all 11 picks. I think you'll get some sort of trade. I don't see them sitting on all 11 picks as it currently stands. I think you might see a combination of a trade down and a trade up, or at the very least, some sort of package that nets them more quality and using some of their quantity to do it. Spin saying at least Douglas will most likely get us a decent comp pick the following year. I don't know, man. I thought the same thing about Tremaine Edmonds. I thought it was locked and loaded, done and dusted that Edmonds was going to get a 3rd round pick for the Bills, considering the contract that he signed with the Bears. Most money ever guaranteed for a linebacker, where it put him in terms of total contract and average annual value. And then we're sitting here with a 4th. And then somehow the Bengals got moved from their 6th to the 3rd. And it's all because the comp pick formula is like the Krabby Patty secret formula and nobody knows what it actually is. Disappointing. Oh, Sespinar saying, oh, thank you very much. 1, thank you for being here. 2, thank you very much for the super chat. That's awesome. And then 3, the comment here. Sespinar saying, thanks for the thoughtful answers. Always enjoy hearing your thoughts. Break down the kick return rules sometimes so I can sound smarter to my friends. You know what? I do. Oh, where? I have that on. Oh, where did I forget? I'm trying to search it on Twitter. I screenshotted what the new kick return rules are and how everything goes down. I just don't want to take the time to search through it right now and have all the dead air. If I had another person on with me, I would just let him sit and riff. But if you ask me on the next show, I 100% will break them down because I have the link and everything for it. Actually, as I talk here, do I maybe have? Here we go. I found the screenshot. So you want to sound smarter to your friends, record what I'm about to say and memorize it and repeat it to them. So the kicker will kick the ball from his own 35-yard line. 10 of his teammates will line up on the other team's 40-yard line. The receiving team's 9 or 10 blockers will line up on their own 35. The kick must land between the 20 and the goal line. A kick that either goes out of bounds or lands short of the 20 will be awarded to the receiving team at the 40-yard line. A kick that goes into the end zone for a touchback will go out to the receiving team's 30-yard line. Other than the kicker and returners, no players may move until the ball either touches the ground or is fielded by a returner. Those are the new kick return rules. I found the screenshots. I'm very proud of myself. Oh, RJ going with the conspiracy theory here, saying the NFL made an example out of Bean signing all those $1.77 million contracts. I really think it was a punishment for that. Honestly, I'm not really here to tell you that you're wrong. It's wild. I thought it was guaranteed that they were going to get a 3rd. I don't know how they didn't. I'm still kind of baffled by it, but them's the breaks, unfortunately, at this spot. If you folks have not already, for those of you still here watching live, before we head out, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. And I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks. So again, before you leave, if you haven't already, please drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team. Thank you to everybody who rode with myself and James live on this episode of Disguise Coverage. Thank you for all the questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, the back and forth with one another, with each other. Thank you very much to Sespinar for the super chat and the kind words. Really appreciate that as well. many, many thanks to James Foster for riding with me on this episode. Again, give him a follow on Twitter if you're on Twitter, at No Flags Film. Dude's just making compilation videos of different prospects and players. He's got really good analysis. And again, like he was here on the show, there's no bias. There's no ulterior motive. It's just his evaluation process, what he thinks, what he knows is good, structure, technique, X's and O's, evaluation, like at its finest. He does a really good job. And he's someone that I gravitate towards. So give him a follow. He does really good work. Appreciate the comments that are coming through. For myself, to thank you, Bills Are Electric, and thank you, RJ. Appreciate you folks. And yeah, RJ James was super knowledgeable. Again, he's a great follow on Twitter at No Flags Film. So many thanks to him. Many thank you to you folks who rode with me live here on this episode. Thank you to all of you who did not watch live. If you're watching later on YouTube, listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. If you are listening later on YouTube, please drop a like on this video. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. If you're here on YouTube now or later, please turn on notifications for this playlist here on the Cover One channel, and subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole, because we have you covered pretty much every single day of the week with anything and everything you need to know for the Buffalo Bills. Thank you again to Mr. James Foster. Thank you to all you folks, whether you tune in live or tune in later. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next Tuesday, April 9th, 9 p.m. as we continue this series with another tremendous guest, with building this Buffalo Bills draft board as we go forward in the month of April, leading up until the NFL draft. Join myself and Eric Turner tomorrow night, Wednesday, April 3rd, 7 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of the Cover One Film Room. We will be doing our wide receiver comps episode. It's going to be awesome. Film, breakdown, size, frame, production, skill sets, traits, play style, anything and everything for a lot of the wide receivers in this class, a lot of targets for the Bills and the fits particularly. It's going to be a great episode. It's one we've been sitting on for several weeks, but things kept happening each week or each Wednesday that caused us to pivot. So we're going back to this topic. Again, drop a like on this video. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is. Word of mouth is tremendously appreciated. If you thought this show was terrible, that's cool. Tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. Again, I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Godspeed. And as always,